Every day, we're surrounded by technology that feels indispensable. But what about the inventions that didn't make it? Today, we're diving into some fascinating old inventions that should have been game changers but fell short. Let's explore the excitement, the heartbreak, and, most importantly, why these ideas didn't take off. And what if they had? Stick around because you won't believe how close we came to living in a very different world. Throughout history, inventors have always been pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Some of their ideas changed the world, while others were, let's say, less successful. But what makes an invention fail? Was it timing, cost, or just bad luck? In this video, we'll take a closer look at a few brilliant yet forgotten inventions. And let's get you thinking, what if they hadn't failed? How would our world be different today? Let's start with one that might look familiar but was a bit ahead of its time. Which invention do you think would have changed your life if it had succeeded? Let me know in the comments. In 1983, Motorola launched the Dynatac, the very first mobile phone. Now, today's smartphones are slim, fast, and loaded with features. But back then, the Dynatac was revolutionary despite its, well, brick-like appearance. Imagine holding a phone that weighed nearly 2 pounds. Sure, it was bulky, but it gave people a taste of what mobile communication could be. At the time, people were thrilled by the idea of being able to call from anywhere, no cords attached. The Dynatac felt like something out of a science fiction movie. But here's the thing, it wasn't affordable for most people. At a whopping $4,000, it was more a luxury item than a must-have gadget. Plus, it only gave you 30 minutes of talk time after 10 hours of charging. Now, of course, mobile phones are as common as shoes, but the Dynatac paved the way for all that. Without this clunky pioneer, we might not have the sleek devices we do today. Electric vehicles might feel like a 21st century breakthrough. But back in the mid-80s, British inventor Sir Clive Sinclair introduced the Sinclair C5. This tiny battery-powered electric vehicle was meant to revolutionize how we get around. It was eco-friendly and cost-efficient. But there was one big problem. It was more like a go-kart than a car. It looked like a toy, but Sinclair believed it was the future of transport. The problem? You were sitting so low to the ground that regular cars couldn't even see you. Can you imagine if the Sinclair C5 had taken off? Would we all be driving around in little electric pods today? The timing just wasn't right. The world wasn't ready for electric vehicles yet, and the C5's awkward design didn't help. But it did plant the seed for the electric car revolution we're experiencing today. Now picture this. It's the 1960s, and AT&T unveils the Picturephone, promising video calls that feel straight out of a futuristic dream. Imagine how mind-blowing that must have been at a time when people were still using rotary phones. For just $160 to install and $16 for a 3-minute call, you could see the person you were talking to on the other end. Back then, this felt like the future. People were excited. This was the technology of tomorrow today. But here's the catch. The Picturephone wasn't very user-friendly. It was expensive, the video quality was poor, and it didn't catch on as people had hoped. Think about how we rely on Zoom and FaceTime now. But back then, you'd spend $16 for a blurry, awkward 3-minute video call. Yeah. No thanks. But what if the Picturephone had worked? Would Zoom have been a thing? Or would video calls have taken off decades earlier? Let's take a detour into the realm of weird transportation with the monowheel. Invented in 1869, this was a single-wheel vehicle that you sat inside. Yes, inside the wheel, controlling it as you went. You had to balance yourself, and if you weren't careful, the monowheel might tip over. It sounds crazy, right? Well, it was. Who needs cars when you can wobble down the street in a giant hamster wheel? The monowheel never really took off. Balancing was tricky, steering was a nightmare, and it just wasn't practical. But hey, it was fun to look at. Can you imagine a world where monowheels became mainstream? Rush hour traffic would be a circus. In the world of cinema, filmmakers have always looked for new ways to engage audiences. Enter Smello Vision, a system that allowed viewers to smell what was happening on screen. This invention debuted in 1960, with scents pumped into the theater to match the action on screen. Imagine the excitement. People were ready for the next evolution in moviegoing, a true 4D experience. But sadly, Smello Vision didn't live up to the hype. The smells didn't sync up with the movie, and sometimes, instead of pleasant aromas, audiences got a whiff of something less enjoyable. Needless to say, it didn't catch on. You were expecting roses, and you got burnt popcorn. But what if Smello Vision had worked? Would we be watching movies today with a scent machine next to our popcorn? One of the most iconic failed inventions has to be the jetpack. In the 1960s, Bell Aerosystems developed the Bell Rocket Belt, a personal jetpack that could launch a person into the air for about 30 seconds. It was the stuff of comic books and movies. Imagine how excited people were. This was the future. Flying to work in a jetpack? Who wouldn't want that? But in reality, it wasn't as glamorous. The flight time was too short, it was dangerous to operate, and it was incredibly expensive. The dream of personal jetpacks never took off, pun intended. But what if jetpacks had become mainstream? Would we all be flying to work now? Safety first, especially when it comes to cars. The automotive pedestrian collision avoidance device was a forward-thinking invention designed to reduce accidents involving pedestrians. Using sensors, this device aimed to detect obstacles and prevent accidents before they happened. In the early 20th century, with cars becoming more common, road safety became a serious concern. But despite its potential, this device never made it into mass production, largely because the technology was too advanced for its time and too expensive to implement on a wide scale. What if this had become standard in cars? Could it have saved countless lives and reshaped modern safety standards? Next up, we have one of the strangest inventions, the window baby cage. In the 1930s, London, parents living in cramped apartments were concerned about their babies getting enough fresh air and sunlight. So, they invented a cage that hung outside the window, giving babies the outdoor time they needed, while dangling several stories up. No baby monitors or strollers here, just some fresh air and a touch of vertigo. Unsurprisingly, the idea never caught on. But imagine if it had. City skylines would look very different. In the early 20th century, another fascinating invention was the Firefighter helmet sprinkler. The idea was simple. When firefighters ran into burning buildings, the helmet would spray water to keep them cool and protected from heat. While the concept seemed sound, in practice it was awkward and hard to control. Water would spray in all directions, making it hard for firefighters to see and navigate fires effectively. If this invention had worked, maybe firefighting gear today would include sprinklers on every helmet, giving firefighters an extra line of defense. So why did these amazing inventions fail? It came down to a few key factors. Some were just too early for their time. The world wasn't ready for electric cars or video calls yet. Many were too expensive for everyday consumers, like the Dynatac and Picturephone. Some were not practical enough to catch on, like the Sinclair C5 or the monowheel. Ideas like the Jetpack and Smello Vision sounded cool but couldn't deliver on their promises. But here's the twist. Many of these so-called failures laid the groundwork for some of the modern inventions we rely on today. So the Picturephone may have failed, but it helped pave the way for every video call we make today. The The Sinclair C5 didn't take off, but it inspired the electric vehicles revolutionizing our roads. In a way, these failures succeeded in shaping the future. And there you have it. Some of the coolest inventions that never became popular, but boy, did they have potential. Now let me ask you, which would you have loved to see succeed? Comment down below. Please hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.